We want to thank you for inviting us to come out today. Shifting was really a labor of love for us to write, and we welcome any opportunity that we have to talk about it. We really wrote Shifting to celebrate Black women and to shed light on what it is to essentially live in double jeopardy, being both Black and female, and therefore having two distinct forms of bias to deal with. So we talked to dozens of women from all walks of life, ages 18 to 80, about what it was to live at this intersection of identity. What were their experiences with bias? How did they deal with those experiences? And perhaps most importantly, how did those experiences affect them emotionally, physically, and psychologically? And when we were done, we had this incredible array of stories that became the heart and soul of Shifting. Kamea is going to talk a little bit about our research, and then I'm going to define for you what Shifting is.
We conducted the African American Women's Voices Project, which was an attempt, as Cherise said, to learn about African American women's experiences of racial and gender bias in their own lives. We wanted to know what it was like to be at school, to be at work, to be in relationships, to be a mother, and whether racial and gender bias even impacted them when they looked into the mirror. So we had a group of research assistants. We conducted surveys with 333 women from across the nation, all geographical regions, and these were open-ended surveys with questions that mostly allowed for people to write in about their experiences. And we also did in-depth hour-and-a-half to 2.5-hour interviews with a smaller group of 71 women. As Cherise mentioned, we had women from ages 8 to 80 with really good age representation from the early 20s through the early 50s, women from all parts of the country, women from all walks of life. It was skewed toward women who were middle class, college educated, and professional, but we also had women who were struggling financially, some who were on welfare, who were or who had been homeless, women who were working class. And it was a way to try to get a snapshot of some of the threads that cut across and cut through the population of Black women. We know that there are many differences, but we were listening for some similarities in our experiences.
Shifting is our term for all of the ways that Black women deal with racism and sexism. Shifting is the masks that we often wear, the roles that we play, and the emotional changes that we go through in the face of bias. Shifting is having a job interview, and before you go, you take the braids out of your hair. Or you put your twists and your locks up into a tight little bun so that the prospective employer doesn't make assumptions about your politics or your personality based on a hairstyle. Shifting is going to Saks Fifth Avenue or Robinson's or Bergdorf's and being followed around by a security guard and becoming enraged and having to figure out what to do with that anger. Do you confront him? Do you report him? Do you ignore him? Or do you turn around and walk out of the store? Shifting is being a dynamic woman on campus or in the workplace. And then when you get home to your boyfriend or your husband, you shrink a little bit. You downplay your opinions or you downplay some of your achievements. I know some people are shaking their heads, not everybody does it, but some people do. But some women feel they need to do it to make sure that their partner feels empowered. And shifting is often fighting back. It is confronting that security guard. It's sending emails and writing letters to get Don Imus taken off the air, at least for a little while. It's leaving a job that you find stifling and starting your own business. So it's all of the ways that we deal with bias. Now, it's important for me to say here that shifting is necessary. As long as there is racism or sexism, you have to manage it in some way. You have to find a way to cope with it. And shifting can be very positive if it allows you to build bridges to other people, to access opportunity, to climb the corporate ladder so that you can make the most of your talent and take care of your family. It may even introduce you to a part of yourself you weren't familiar with. You know, maybe you take up mahjong or tennis or golf to have something in common with some of your colleagues. And you find out, you know, I'm really good at this. You know, this gives me a lot of pleasure and joy. Those are all great things. But too often, shifting can be profoundly debilitating. We believe that it's one of the primary triggers for many of the maladies that disproportionately affect Black women, like hypertension, like obesity, like fibroids, and like depression. Black women have a higher incidence of depressive symptoms than other groups of women. So it's very important that we become self-aware. If you know that you shift, you can look at how you shift and how it impacts you. The two arenas in which Black women feel compelled to shift the most are the workplace and school. And Kamea is going to talk a little bit about both.
We heard from many sisters about their challenges to shift at school and at work. Often it was the age-old myth of inferiority that haunted their experiences in school or in the corporate corridor and that fueled their shifting. Nancy, not her real name, a college student, talked about the pressure to counter white people's beliefs about her. And she said, I felt I had to change my external appearance, the way I talk, the way I walk, the way I carried myself, the way I wore my hair. I had to create all of this hype to be perceived as an intelligent Black woman. I had to walk on eggshells around white people. A majority of the women whom we surveyed reported that they had at times changed the way they acted in order to fit in or be accepted by whites. And many said that they changed the way they spoke. So speech was an area where sisters often acknowledged some shift. That they may have changed the way they enunciated words, their use of slang. Many talked of taming or quieting their gestures and mannerisms. And some talked about being careful about what they spoke about. A number of women spoke of how the myth of inferiority led them to have to always represent. One sister said, also a college student, I have to represent every Black woman in the world every day of my life. Any move I make or step I take, I'm never judged as an individual. I make a statement for Black women, good or bad, whether I want to or not. So for many, battling the myth of inferiority, the myth that we're not so smart, the myth that we're not competent, became an ongoing preoccupation. Interestingly, when Black women excel, which of course is very often, when we speak the Queen's English, we're often seen as exceptions. And a number of women shared with us how weary they are of hearing, you're so articulate. I mean, I don't think that word is very often used about whites, for example, but it is often about us. Or sisters talked about giving a really excellent presentation or report and getting feedback from their colleagues, gee, you don't even seem Black. And those kinds of comments are a real testimony to the pervasiveness of the stereotypes, that if you excel, if you do well, if you don't fit the negative stereotypes, then somehow you're not really Black. At school and work, Black women often have to shift to deal with a sense of invisibility. So that was a theme that we heard a lot. Feeling invisible, dismissed, shunted to the sidelines, not getting the challenging assignments at work, not being heard at the meeting. Your ideas don't get taken seriously, but when another person echoes the same thing, people kind of say, yeah, that's right.